The Monday Maydayology podcast by Hasty Fire Products, home of the Hasty Rescue Strap, the game-changing rapid intervention tool. Hi, thanks for joining me for another episode of the Monday Maydayology podcast. I'm your host, Hank Henline. Today we have another friend of mine. His name is Jay Morgan. He's a retired Battalion Chief from Frederick County. And if you listen to episode number 1 with Battalion Chief Steve Schultz, you may have heard this name mentioned during Schultz's story. So Jay was also involved in this same incident that Chief Schultz was involved in, and he was on the same crew as Schultz. However, he ended up being in a different part of the building when things kind of went sideways. So we're going to listen to Jay. We're going to hear his perspective and his side of the story. Before we get to that, whatever platform you're listening to this on, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or somewhere else or on YouTube, make sure you're giving this page a follow and rate the podcast if you're on one of the podcast platforms. That really helps me out a lot. Also, please share this and like and subscribe and all that other good stuff. Also, don't forget to follow me on my social medias. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media. It is at Hasty Rescue Strap on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and on Facebook as Hasty Fire Products. And also, another reminder, don't forget to sign up for the Key City Fire Conference in Frederick, Maryland, March 13th through the 16th. Go to www.keycityfireconference.org. It's filling up fast, so you don't want to miss out. And with that, we're going to get to the show with Jay. All right, welcome back to the next episode of the Monday Maydayology podcast. Today I have with me Battalion Chief retired from Frederick County, Jay Morgan. So Jay was also involved in the incident from the first episode with Battalion Chief Schultz. If you remember, actually we won't get into that much of it. I'll let you tell your story, but he was also involved. He's coming to us with 38 years total experience in the fire service. He did 23 years in Frederick County and retired as a Battalion Chief. Chief Morgan, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
But go ahead and tell the audience anything you want them to know about you.
Oh, cool. So I was pretty much born into the fire service. My pops, he was a long time fireman in Frederick City, Frederick County. He's still around, but he doesn't really volunteer much anymore because, he's feeding the horses now. At the age 14, that's when I really started my personal fire service career. Joined as a junior member cadet at the local fire department. At the age 16, like all young punks in the state of Maryland, I started taking Memphrey classes so I could ride the fire trucks and be the fireman I wanted to be. 17, I graduated high school. I moved to another town, joined another volunteer fire company, and I moved into that station, and my life changed forever. I met 3 chiefs there. They became awesome mentors for myself, and life was good. Right around the same time, taking a Memphrey class, I met this individual I like to call the Colonel, and this audience here would know him as Steve Schultz. So Steve Schultz and I have been friends for about 35 years. We took a lot of classes together, hung out together outside of work, so we've known each other a long time, obviously. In 1999, I went on the job at Frederick County. I actually got hired somewhere else first. I was getting ready to start there, and Frederick County called, and they had better pay and a better schedule, so I went to Frederick County. And we actually had the first, I'll use the term lightly, recruit class. We went to school a very short period of time, and that's where I got my firefighter and safety survival training that Schultz mentioned in his recording the other day. And then multiple assignments, and I worked in this county, in the city. In 2006, I got promoted to lieutenant. 15, and I was assigned to, actually when I got promoted to lieutenant, I was assigned to Middletown, Station 7. Then I moved into the city for a bunch of years at Station 2. I got promoted to captain. 2015, I went to the truck house. First time ever for me being on a ladder truck. I'm an engine guy, but I had a really cool shift there. And then 8 short months later, I got promoted to Battalion Chief, and that's how I finished my career out, retired in middle of 2022 with 23 years on. Still volunteer, not as active as a lot of people, but I do still volunteer.
Very good. I didn't realize that you were a captain for such a short period of time. I think when I came on the job, you were already a battalion chief. So yeah, that's interesting.
I'd been
Cool.
acting. I'd been an acting battalion chief for a long time. So even though I was only a captain a short couple months, it's not like I hadn't done it in any capacity at that point.
All right. So you were also involved in the same incident from episode number 1. You guys were on the same crew. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
All right.
We're on the engine.
So great. Go ahead and
Yep.
you tell us your side of the story.
All right. That day I was actually working overtime for Schultz's spot at Middletown. Like he said, typical day. I'm going to try not to repeat everything he said. It was a typical day at Firehouse. The box dropped. Untypical was the fact that we had a crew of 6 awesome individuals. Like myself and Schultz, and the driver at that point in time had over 15 years in the fire service. Big V, or Lieutenant Walker, he was over 25 years at that time. And the other 2 guys were, even though they were newer in the volunteer system, they were decent guys. They'd done a lot of training. The one thing about the volunteer system there at that particular firehouse is they've always been strong on the training aspect of things. So we had an excellent crew. We were rolling heavy, and we were out the door fast. For those listeners that don't know the area, we actually took a major highway and we were heading west, and we had to go up the mountain, a bunch of curves, and then make a right-hand turn on a hill with an angle of less than 90 degrees. And it's funny, I remember Big V saying to the driver, "Hey, you think you're going to make it?" And the driver just giggled and said, "I got this." And we made it. It was just one of those weird things, you remember. I just remember because he was laughing. So we got up there, and like Schultz said, man, we were in the middle of nowhere, 2,700 foot long driveway, I believe it was. When we pulled down and around, as he said, we parked on the corner of the Bravo Charlie corner. So we were actually utilizing side Charlie as our main access. And again, to put another picture of this house, it was 1 story with an attic, 2 story with an attic, and then another 1 story with an attic. On both sides of the 2 story, I believe, there was a chimney in between the first floor, the single story and the 2 story. So when we arrived, Schultz and I were first off the wagon, and we met the incident commander. And I remember him saying, "Just go straight up them steps to the left. That's what the owner said." So Schultz and I took our tools and went. I believe he had the irons. I had another Halligan and a 6-foot hook, I think, when we headed up there. Went to the left, and like he said, the smoke would come and go. It wasn't heavy by any means at all. It wasn't hot. It was just like looking around here, and every now and then smoke would come up from this wall, this floor, and this wall in this cluttered area. And I remember being down on my hands and knees, like moving stuff while Schultz was poking the wall. And the smoke would come up in my face and then go away, come up my face. So we were searching, and it was really weird and couldn't figure out. And of course, and nobody else was coming at this point in time. The guys were stretching the line up the stairwell. And like he said, you come in that side Charlie door, and it's like almost like an atrium in a hotel. It was like wide open type thing with this big stairwell going right up the middle. And they were stretching the line up the steps there. And Lieutenant Walker had made his way up there. We were looking around, and Schultz actually found the pull-down steps right at to go to the attic at the top of the 2nd-story landing. So I went up in there, and I actually went the entire length, back and forth. There was 0 smoke conditions in the 2-story portion of the house attic. I came back down. We shut the landing. We were searching some more, and that's when Schultz said, "Hey, look at the smoke out here on these shingles." So like me and Vern took our turns, walked over to the window, looked out there, and I'm like, "Man, that's so weird. What is going on here?" So I said to Vern, "Hey, I'm going to go do another 360. And he said, "All right, sounds good." So I left them, went outside Charlie door. I turned right, which would be going towards side D. I entered the 1-story portion of the house. I still had my tools, which would have been the Charlie Delta corner is where I went into. There is a very light haze of smoke at the ceiling level, and I mean very light, almost like if you burn a piece of toast or something. Says, "Well, I'm going to open up." So I took the 6-foot hook and I jabbed the ceiling and it about broke my shoulders. So I'm like, well, I had a joist. So I moved over, bang, kept hitting. It was solid. I moved I must have put 6, 8 different holes in that ceiling, or tried to, and I kept hitting solid. So I'm like, well, this is plywood. And as I was giving on that, I turned and looked to my right, and there was the framed chimney chase. They had framed it out in 2x and put up drywall or whatever. So I went over there, bang, tried to poke it, same thing. It was hard as a rock. They obviously had plywood behind it. So I exited on side Charlie out of the 1-story, and I went to the Delta. And as I came around the corner to the Delta side, the flames were blowing out of this circular gable vent, at least 20 to 30 feet. I mean, it was cooking, blowing out of there. So I think, well, I found it. So as Schultz alluded to back then, I think only the driver and the officer had portable radios back then. Mm-hmm. And we were still in the low band system, I'm pretty sure, so I didn't have a radio. So I went back to the main doorway, and I hollered up there. I was like, hey, Big B, I found it. It's over here. We need a line over here. So he acknowledged me, and then that's when he sent Russ down to pull the line. So as Russ was coming down the steps towards me, and I'm standing on a porch, I think it was like a wooden porch or whatever, kind of like a deck, that leads to, it was covered, that leads to the door that we were using as the main access. And boom, this noise happened. And it was weird. It wasn't like an explosion. It was kind of like you dropped a pallet 4 2x6s 30 feet. It kind of like smacked, but it was just this loud boom. And before I could even think to myself, what the hell? Boom, right in the center of my chest. So people have known that I got blown off the porch per se, but it didn't lift me up and threw me. It was kind of like you punched me in the chest and it threw me back. When I landed on the ground, I saw the roof had come off the house. The entire roof had come off the 2-story part of the house, twisted, and came down off square. And I was like, what is going on? Of course, at this time, I'm kind of in yeah. So lots going on right here, right? So I'm laying there thinking, what in the hell just happened? And like that, shit, those guys are in there. So I hop up off the ground, and the door shut. The explosion had blown the door shut, pinched the hose off and everything. So as I got up, got myself, cognizant again, I started going back up to the to the porch. And at that time, Rob DeGrange, I think, was working at Station 8 that day. He come flying around the corner saying, we got to get these guys, got to get us out. Hold on, man. So we forced the door, and that's where I saw Russ. Russ was getting himself together, and he looked like he was in a lot of pain. He come on out, and then me and DeGrange, behind where Russ was, almost maybe 5 feet off the bottom step, that's where Atkins was laying on the ground unconscious. So we got him out. I don't even remember how we got him out of there, to be honest with you. But we got him out, got him over to the engine, and he regained consciousness and all that. I said to the driver, hey, have you heard from them? He said, no. I said, call a Mayday. We'll go look. And as I come around the engine, I saw them two, Vern and Schultz, on what was actually side out, coming across, sizzling. The portable was dripping off the front of Vern. They were fried. So I went over and made sure they, were okay, weren't going to die or nothing right then and there. And I was like, wow, this still, what the hell just happened? So, they were taken care of. We got Russ taken care of. Atkins was all taken care of. At this point, and still, even, when I tell the story, it seems like this whole thing were 2 minutes. My God, we were at least 10 minutes into it at this point, right? And we were still the only ones there. And I think when Rob DeGrange was walking down the driveway, that's when the incident happened. And he came flying around, to try to get to the guys. I'm not sure what he saw or whatever, but so A2 had just gotten there. And this was a while into it. But it's funny because, Schultz alluded to, it went from nothing to a major problem in no time. And so much, that could have happened, should have happened, could have affected the outcome. Luckily, they're still alive, though. But I remember, one of the things that really sticks to me is I remember looking at Russ and he was in a lot of pain, and like looking around him and seeing Atkins laying at the bottom of the floor and he wasn't moving. And I mean, the entire second floor of that place was 100% involved, and it was blown out. The attic at that time, so the attic and the second floor were 100% involved. And the feeling I had was like, I thought those other guys were dead, and
Sure.
it was a little. I mean, it's weird. You can't explain it unless you're ever into that position, right? But Schultz, especially because me and Schultz had been friends forever. We'd been friends for a long time by the time this thing happened. So it wasn't just like, hey, you saw another firefighter pass away. I thought I saw my friend pass away, and Vern was a good officer, and I'd befriended Vern. But everybody was okay. And then I remember Schultz said about how nice of a day it was, right? It was.
Yeah.
But man, no sooner this happened came the wind. And then it became a nice wind-blown fire, and then ultimately became a woods fire because it was spreading it all over the place because that, Dahlgren R's on the side of South Mountain there. So it was like, thinking about it today, it's like the ultimate scenario for an officer test. It's just, I mean, if you stop and think about everything that happened from the time actually the call was dispatched that day till the end of it, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. I remember hearing some other volunteer officers talk about it, and I think I've seen it in comments on Facebook and stuff. And then I think you even alluded to it, that the roof blew off of the house and twisted and came back down. Like,
absolutely.
That is something that's just, it's,
yeah. So,
and I believe you, it's insane to think about how that happens, and then people inside are not seriously injured from that, just from that part,
Yeah. So I really think that I think when the door shut, when that force shut the door, it's probably what saved me from being like crush syndrome to my chest, because I only got like one punch and it stopped, but it was enough to blow me off the porch. So I hate to think if I'd have got the whole force coming down that stairwell and out the front door like that. Craziness. But yeah, so ultimately what had happened was, as Schultz alluded to, that house, man, that guy built that house tight. He had that T111 all over the place. So when the flashover occurred, I believe, if my memory's correct, that caused a secondary smoke explosion in the attic. And that's what blew it up off of the walls, turned it, and brought it back down, was that smoke explosion. But the fact that it didn't, like Atkins and Russ, they were still in the stairwell. So that force came down out of the attic and blew them right down the steps. But it didn't do that to, I guess, the area where Schultz and Vern were, that room they were working in, because of all that stuff, I imagine it didn't blow down on them like it did the rest of that middle part of the house where the stairwell was and everything. And I think in that aspect, they got lucky because, number one, they were lit up by the fire. They were burning. Had they taken a full-blown percussion like that, might have knocked them unconscious. And, then we all know what probably would have happened at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. For those who don't know, Vern is also a friend of mine. He volunteered the same place that I volunteered. He was a chief officer when I started. I've seen his turnout gear. He still has it. He keeps it in his basement, and it is completely burned to a crisp. So I absolutely agree with you there. There's no doubt in my mind that if they were not conscious, they would definitely not be here. They were legitimately burning. And then, like you said, the radio was melted.
Oh yeah, I saw it dripping off his front of his gear. I really do think the clutter in the room that they were in, and like Schultz said, there was two rooms. I remember the first room we went into had a lot of stuff. The second room wasn't as bad, and I'm pretty sure they were ultimately in that first room we went into, and there was a lot of stuff because they were storing stuff in there, and it was high. So I really think that ended up protecting them from the explosion percussion. They just took on the fire, which is bad enough in itself. Not to take away from that.
Was there ever any investigations? I mean, I'm sure there was investigations, but was there ever any determination on what caused the fire?
It was a chimney fire.
Oh, chimney. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it extended into that void area.
Yeah, that void area that he done up tight and we couldn't get to it. So that's what happened. It went up into that void area, then it went into the attic of that one-story portion of the house on side Delta. So what we were seeing was just the puffs that would make it through the wall into that room, or those two rooms we were in. And then I guess, whatever, for whatever reason, it would come and go. I guess the pressurization of the fire in that attic area, once it got through the louver and finally melted and burned the whole entire louver away, then that was it. And I think then it was just, a matter of minutes, if that, and that flashover happened. It would have been interesting. Ultimately, that house burned down because, the amount of fire, when everybody was accounted for and taken care of, we actually took 2 lines back up. We made it up to the second floor. And it was like, man, we're pissing in the wind here. Let's get the hell out of here. And, it became a surround and drown. And I don't think we saved it. I honestly don't remember, but we were there a long time. That's typically an indicator if you burned it to the ground, But it would have been nice to be able to go back and see the actual fire path from that little attic area into that room that caused that flashover.
Yeah.
And I really think, because if you remember, Schultz talked about how fast it went, boom, it's hot, we need to go, right? Mm-hmm. I swear that's when the louver burnt away and it went into full-blown fire. And because, it was every bit of 25, 30 feet venting out of the side of that. And, what are they, like 30 inches maybe?
Sure. Yeah.
It was a good fire.
So did the flashover occur first and then the explosion, or were they simultaneous? Okay.
Almost simultaneous. The flashover created the smoke explosion.
I know some people, they tend to interchange the term smoke explosion, backdraft, and that's a whole debate in itself that I'm not trying to get into, but I know I've heard Schultz say it, both ways, explosions, backdrafts. Typically, we're taught that that's due to an influx of fresh air, fresh oxygen to a ventilation-limited fire, typically, right? Can you recall, was there anything you think that would have caused that, or do you think it was just when that louver went, that allowed enough air in?
Yeah. So right off the bat, no doubt in my mind, it was a smoke explosion that day. Why? Because I was in that attic. There was no fire up there. So backdraft, that's what it's looking for. It's got all the elements, but it needs the air, right? So if there had been a fire up there, when I opened that, or when Steve pulled that attic ladder down, poof, the backdraft would have happened there. But I was up in there. It was clear as a day. There wasn't any smoke. So just shutting that back up, smoke had made it up in there somehow, but there wasn't enough to get a fire up in there by that time. There wasn't enough time for that to have happened. If I'd have been up in there and there had been smoke in the attic, then I'd say, maybe, by then it might have been a backdraft. No way. Absolutely no way. And I definitely think, when that thing flashed, it flashed 2 rooms. And I think just the pressure and the heat then had lit off that smoke, and boom. And it's hard to explain to the crowd, especially going this way, how that house was laid out. That atrium style middle of the house really provided a whole nother obstacle and layer of how you think about reactions happening, like flashover, smoke explosion, backdrafts. It wasn't your standard enclosed stairwell to a closed second floor type things. It was open, and I think that without a doubt that paid a huge deal in how excessive that explosion was. It's so weird, you cannot explain to you the sound that thing made. So we were saying, we've all heard explosions before, but this thing it's just weird. So I 100% think it was a smoke explosion caused by the rapid flashover on that side of the house. And I also think, right, because it was one side. All that fire and everything happened on the flashover, happened on the Delta side of things. And I think that's why the roof twisted. Like if you hold a box above your head and just hit it with your left hand, it's going to move a different way than if you lift it with 2 hands, right? Sure. So I think that's why it twisted when it come up and came down. And then, I tell you, it was 100% fire up there then. So
one thing that's sticking out to me, you'll usually hear in Mayday classes or survival classes, RIC classes and stuff, when you talk about line of duty deaths or near misses, you hear it's usually some sort of perfect storm, right? It's not one little thing that went wrong. It's a bunch of little things that kind of lead up to this, and I'm sure that's true in this case as well. But something that's kind of sticking out to me is there 5 of you, right, inside at the time.
So, yes. Well,
Yeah,
I was
okay,
on the
so-
front porch. 4 in
So-
the house. I was on the front porch.
Okay, fair enough. Regardless, 5 of you. It seemed like all the right things lined up to where we didn't have an unfortunate event where one of you guys didn't make it, right? So the 2 upstairs, Vernon Schultz, it seems like you think the actual clutter, the hoarding condition, not necessarily hoarding conditions, but the clutter in the storage boxes, which at first might have seemed like a hindrance, was probably a good thing for those guys. And then it seems like you deciding to leave the room to find better access actually turned out better because it puts you in a good position to make that the rescue of the unconscious firefighter. Where if you were still inside there, I mean, you could have been unconscious yourself, or maybe just not in a position to make that happen. So you can talk about the things that go wrong all the time, but it's also, I feel like, important to talk about the things that go right. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think about that too, because when we were working, when I was still in the room with Schultz and Vern, I was the furthest in. I went in first, Schultz came behind me, and then Vern was closer to the doorway. At that time, that's just how we entered, no real reason why. And then I think, man, if I still been up there, that'd have been 3 of us that had to get out. With, who makes the decision, who goes first, afterthought kind of stuff. But yet, deciding to do that secondary 360 definitely worked out.
What do you think is the biggest lesson that you learned or that you can pass on to others to learn from that incident?
Oh, without a doubt, in my mind, this entire thing was preventable. The lack of a 360 by the first arriving officer, I mean, to me, is ultimately a huge reason why this happened. I've been doing this long enough. Even then, I'd been doing it long enough to know if a complete 360 would have been done on this, it'd have been spotted. There was by the time, again, it sounds like a long time, but by the time I left that second floor and actually found that fire, that thing had been cooking for a while, man. That fire had been in that chase. They come up and got into that attic. Something would have been visible from the exterior. But there definitely wasn't a 360. And to me, that's one thing I got to stress, right? A 360, as much as you can possibly do it. I'm not the only one. Look what happened in Loudoun County. And I know that guy, he'll vouch for a 360. And, those of listening who do training and listen to other podcasts and everything, multiple 360s, never a bad idea, man. If you can listen to what's going on while you're en route, and if you're picking up on things that aren't happening or you're picking up on little crews, do another 360. It doesn't hurt. That's one of the things. And I can tell you the leadership qualities of Lieutenant Wachter, the experience factor that we had on that crew that day, man, it's hard to get that. And in today's fire service, you're not going to see that as much as you did back then, because we all came from huge volunteer backgrounds, man. When we were volunteering, we were running fire in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot. I mean, wasn't the war days in the Bronx or anything like that, but for small town Western Maryland, we ran a lot of fire. And we did a lot of live burns back then. That was before 1483 came a big thing. So we were, we had a lot of experience to help feed our mindset when operating in a situation like that. And what I really loved on Schultz's podcast the other day is listen to the conversation back and forth. And even when I said, hey, Bern, I think I'm going to go out and do a 360, he's like, yep. He didn't tell me no. He listened to us and took our input, and ultimately, it helped everybody by doing that. But you got to have that, right? And you don't get that in today's fire service because we're not running the calls. We don't run the fires like we did back then. We don't get the opportunities to do the live fire training like we did back then, right? So take Frederick County, for example. it's 600 people now, you know.
Yeah.
My God, what 300 of them probably got less than 5 years, or right around 5 years are left on the job, and some of them probably never even called a fire yet. You know, now put them in that scenario. What's going to happen if you got to train? Now you got to train. And it's hard to get people to want to do the RIT type training. It's not just RIT type training, right? The save your own kind of stuff. Getting the staff as a leader, getting the staff to want to buy into doing that kind of stuff to help save yourself, not just stand out front yard in the RIT team, but help save yourself. I think the ability for us to operate together but independently on that crew that day was great. And I think, you know, it was so rare. It was so rare that you could have 6 people like that on a rig in that situation, and it definitely paid off. I mean, even the driver, excellent driver, you know, and he came in the fire service same time I did. We ran a lot of fires before that day even happened together. So, you know, the whole crew just clicked that day, and I think that's what paid off, is having that knowledge, that experience, and that willing to work together. And especially when Vern, as a unit leader, I think what Vern did that day, especially letting Schultz, you know, run a couple things by him. Hey, here's the radio. He didn't get smart back with him. Like, hey, you know, no shit, I'm an officer, I know how to use the radio. You know, no, he just said, hey, it's gone. Okay, let's plan B. That's going too. So let's get out here. And, you know, true to form, he let Schultz go first. He was the last man out of the house. And when I went over to them that day, they're like, hey, Atkins is still in there. I remember Vern saying, Atkins and Russ are still in there. I said, no, we got them out, man. They're good. You know, let's get you guys taken care of. And
Yeah,
sitting there
go ahead.
even sitting there with their skin burning off, dripping off their ear stuff. Excuse me, I was taking a drink. He was talking about, man, that was quite the jump, Schultz. I didn't think you were going to make it. He was still upbeat after he found out that the whole everybody was out, okay, accounted for, and all that kind of stuff. He was still Vern, and it was a good sign. I think that's why so many people respect him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's a hell of a guy, man. Like I said, you know, and you know, but for those who don't, like I came up in the fire service under Vern. He was the guy where I volunteered that all the young guys looked up to, even though he was the old guy, which is something you don't get very often. So that that in itself is a testament to his character and how he looks after his guys and his leadership style, and definitely something that as I move forward in my career that I want to try to emulate. But yeah, man, he's an incredible fire officer.
So it's a fact, right? Great firefighters make great officers. Great officers make great leaders. It's a formula. It's just figuring out how do you get there. And I can tell you, for me that day, and I think Schultz alluded to it too, I'd never had any training like the firefighter safety and survival. To me, it's to this day the only thing that Memphis really does that's worth anything, in my opinion. Great class, and of course, you know, it's been updated over the years, and Frederick County has always been a leader at that kind of training and bringing when something changes, you know, to that style of training, they bring us back in. You know, we took that training and they ran everybody through it, scenario based and all that, and I don't think that's something that'll change. But definitely at the station level, you got to continue it, and you got to bring all the other stuff that you learn, you know, from the outside training and try it out and see, because you never know. You know, in my 23 years at Frederick County, 2 very significant incidents occurred. One, everybody lived, and the other one, the guy did not. You know, and you got to wonder, and when we'll never know, you know, with Josh, we'll never know, A, what he was thinking and before it happened, and B, what he was thinking after. But I think we can learn from that specific incident, and you can combine the two. Hey, what worked here that didn't work on this one, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
I can definitely tell you, you know, as far as unit officer, first arriving stuff, initial on-scene reports, 360s and all that, have come a long way from when I come on the force there at Frederick County. You can use this incident on Dahlgren Rd as a prime example of why you have to do it.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. I haven't had a chance on this podcast yet to talk much about the Ball Road incident, and I do have plans for 2 of the guys involved to come on and speak about it. but you did bring it up a little bit, and after that incident, there was pretty widespread changes throughout our department. We changed quite a few things, policies, procedures, training, staffing levels, all kinds of stuff. This incident that you guys dealt with on Dahlgren Rd was 22 years ago. The fire service was very different 22 years ago, even though the grand scheme of things, 22 years isn't really that long of a time, but it was vastly different. But after the Dahlgren Rd incident, was there any big changes at the department level like there was with Ball Road?
To my memory, there was no big changes driven by Ball Road. I mean, if that incident would have happened 10 years later, we'd have had a big review about it. We'd have had an after-action report. I think it would have been a more significant follow-up. And like I was telling you before you started recording, no one has ever asked me to give my part of what happened that day. Now, there's been interactions along the way, hey, weren't you out there? Yeah, I saw the roof, twist and all that kind of. Amazingly, that's the thing that everybody focuses on is the roof, going off and coming back down, not the fact. Of course, Schultz, I will say that Schultz did follow up. He did excellent research after that. He wrote an article on that was published. It was really cool, so he did some stuff. But I don't remember any specific training. I can tell you from that point on, the way I did things, especially once I got promoted, I made sure I always covered specific things every time we did a drill, and we always drilled or training the same way. Even though we did different type of stuff, we would always start off with, the incident on-scene report, so forth and so on. I'm a big person. I was always in favor of tactical command because somebody needs to be in charge. But that somebody needs to know what the hell they're doing at some level. And, after being through an incident like that, I can tell you that the incident management failed that day terribly.
So what is your favorite thing to train on then?
Leadership. I'm a leadership guy, man.
Okay.
And that's from the unit to incident management. And because that's where it all happens to me. To me, it starts at the top and goes down, right? And you've been around long enough, you see it. That day, right there, some standard on, and that date, what was that, 2022? Or excuse me, 2002? Is that when that was?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. There was no formal incident command training then, right? So, move along 10 years, we started the leadership development. I was lucky enough to be part of that, and that's one of the reasons why we started, because those type of things kept going. Missed. They're very important things that have to be done. That 360 not getting done that day, almost killed 2 guys. Almost killed 4 guys, actually, So I'll always be, guys like you got all that tactical stuff, that physical, Mayday and RIT team and all that. You're great at that. I like leadership training. It all starts at the top. It all starts with the leader. And I still do stuff myself all the time. I think you should never stop doing it. You should always look at different avenues. I love podcasts. I can listen to them when I'm mowing or, whatever. But I still like going to training. And I still do stuff here at the local volley house from time to time on the training. But, yeah, I'm all about the leadership training. I don't think you can have enough.
I do not disagree with you at all. How long have you been retired now? Is it
just to go back on that real quick, like when I was talking about leadership, to go back to what Vern did that day, his leadership role, second to none, we talked about it, but look at that crew, 4 of us on that, out of that 6 people that day have been chiefs at some level. At least 3 of us have been a battalion chief. I don't know if Schultz was ever a volunteer fire chief, but 3 of us had been fire chiefs. So that crew, just look at that crew that day and where we progressed from that incident. We all went up through the ranks. Leadership did that. And I retired in 2022, so a little over 2 years.
What I was getting at with that, how long you've been gone. I know it hasn't been a long time, but people still talk about how fast you got dressed. Believe it or not, somebody just mentioned it the other day. They still talk about it. So I think you hold the world record for the fastest getting your turnout gear on and on the rig and out the door. Is there anything you can
So,
speak on with that, on how people can improve their gear up time or their turnout time?
yes. And I do appreciate that. Although before I'd even left the job, people were much faster than I had ever been. So I'll go all the way back when I moved into the firehouse as a young 17-year-old guy. Right, there were 7 of us living there. The wagon had 5 seats, and if you want, we only had one driver. Right, so if you wanted a spot, you had to be fast, and that's where I think my quickness started. But you can never make up the time that you can make getting out of the firehouse. I'm not talking about driving 80 miles an hour down Market Street to get to a box alarm. I'm talking about get out of the firehouse. And my thing was, I learned over the years how to set up my gear, right? So I always put my stuff on the same way, always. So I learned, no matter what gear I had, my gloves were always in this pocket. My hood, always in this pocket. Now, and that was my way of doing things. When I was at Station 3 as a firefighter, back then we had to take one or the other, engine or squad. So I'd put my gear in this particular spot, which gave me 50% this way, 50% that way. Right? Yeah. So, and it paid off. Even back then when I was just a firefighter, we were still fast. Our officer was the slowest one, slowed us up all the time back then. So I learned how to place my gear, how to stand my coat up in my phone booth at Station 2. So I could swing it on like a cape, get in the rig. And I was a seatbelt and headset wearer. And I could still go 2 blocks down the street and have everything on ready to go by the time we get there. It's just practice. But we did gear drills all the time, man, because it pays off. Time pays off. And getting your gear on, you can ask anybody, have your gear on, get on the rig. That way you're not standing up, fumbling around. Now, you can buckle and everything else once you get on there, but put your gear on. That's where you pick up time, right? We're in the business to save lives, right? Time saves lives. If we picked up
100%.
At one point in time, I figured out, you work Stage 2, I figured out, driver, instead of getting in the rig and opening the door, you hit that damn button at the office.
Yep.
That gains us 8 seconds. 8 seconds that gains us getting out the door. And believe me, our drivers, when that door was hitting the top of the door frame there, we were rolling. If we were over 37 seconds getting out the door, I was pissed. And that's how we as a team were fast. It just wasn't about me getting my gear on.
I got you.
Because I know by the time I was done riding the fire truck, like little guy and Chief Malta, they were much faster than me by that point. So than I had ever been. So.
That's been a Station 2 thing for sure. Something that everybody assigned there takes pride in. It's got a reputation for fast turnout, and we all still, to this day, try to do it. I mean, I don't know if we're as good as you guys were and Chief Malta, but yeah, that's definitely one of the things that we pride ourselves on, is getting out the door as fast as we can.
Yeah, and getting your gear on, man, that's the first part of it.
Yeah.
I think, too, one thing that changed in my time was when we used to, before the electronics, when a pre-alert used to drop, we moved. Because we always had a good shot that it was going to be us. Now you have if it's you, the little thing goes off. If it's not you, it's not you. But I think that mentality of moving has slowed people down now with the electronics, the in-station things you have now.
Yeah, to a point, we do now have the MDT screens in almost every room of the firehouse. Even before they hit the pre-alert, when we would know if it's us or not anyway, we can still see the calls pop up and pending. So if there's anything close as far as box alarms and stuff, we're moving.
Well, that's awesome, man. Good to hear.
Yeah.
What about Schultz? I don't see is he a quick chief?
Well, it's funny. He's not my chief, so I don't know. He's on B shift in the 3rd Battalion. However, coming up here in January, he is going to be my chief. He got transferred, so I'm actually really looking forward to that. I've been pretty blessed, man, on my shift. I've had really good battalion chiefs at Station 2, so I'm definitely excited for that. Yeah.
Good deal.
Well, Chief, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything important you want these guys to know?
Just keep training, man. The best formula is educate, train, and drill, right? Educate, learn about something, find out the background, how you want to do it, then train on it. Training makes you proficient at what you do. Doesn't make you perfect. No one's perfect in this service, but it makes you proficient. And that's what you get paid to do. That's why you're a firefighter. And then you drill on it from time to time to keep your skills at a proficient level. So educate, train, and drill. One thing I always hated hearing about, I don't know if it's a big thing anymore, but YouTube fireman. So I hated hearing that, right? Because there's some great stuff on YouTube. There really is. But that's the education part of it. Watching something on YouTube doesn't make you proficient at it. You know,
True.
we used to do that. We used to take, hey, look at this skill. Oh, cool, let's do it. Put a training together. We train and train and train and do it. And then every now and then we, bring it back into as a drill. Especially when Cocaine Bob was on the shift. Man, we did a lot of great stuff because that guy is just immaculate. He's a genius, and he has the drive to want to help everybody, not just himself. He wants to help everybody. So once we uncover his hidden secret that he kept from us, that he was a training guru, and so was his dad, we did a lot of that kind of stuff. And that's what you got to do. You got to get out there. You got to do the training. You got to do the drills and be proficient because experience is hard to come by now. I mean, everybody is overly experienced in running medic locals, right? But running, running fires, and you don't run a lot like that day on Dahlgren Rd, the perfect storm in the middle of nowhere. So, you gotta set up your drills to be as close to something like that as you can. And I think that's where we fail a lot because a lot of times when we do, and I was part of a lot of officer exam processes, is we're up against a clock, right? We only have 20 minutes per candidate, so how much can you really do? Where, 20 minutes into that incident that day, there were still only like 7 people on the scene. Something crazy like that. So you gotta do what you can do and do it often. And I think I can definitely tell you, by the time I got off the drive, the officers in the service at that time were far better than when we came on the job. And I don't want to bust on those past officers. They were a product of their culture, but a lot of people from my era on made sure that people in your era were given everything that you should have. And then you can see the results. You guys are taking off, doing a lot more stuff than we ever did. So that's probably about all I can say.
Great. Chief, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on here and giving your side of the story and your take on training. It's really good stuff, man. And
thank you.
I'm glad you're enjoying retirement, but I do miss seeing you around the firehouse every now and then.
Yeah. I miss that part of it too, but I don't miss the bull crap.
Yeah. All right, Chief.
Cool deal, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.